Well, it's time to have Sam Farmer on again. That could only mean the NFL, perhaps back in Los Angeles. The questions, maybe answers, rumors. It's Groundhog Day again, and Sam kind enough to join us. What makes this one different now, Sam?
Yeah, it does. It is Groundhog Day. One thing that makes this different is you have three teams, the Raiders, Rams, and Chargers, all on one-year leases. And so that creates a real competition. Who can get a stadium? You look at the fact that the league has labor and TV locked up for years down the road. The league's experimenting. Roger Goodell experiments with the draft, the Pro Bowl, et cetera, so they're not risk-averse. And then there's this whole concept about changing the way the league bids out Super Bowls and how that relates to L.A. I think that in the next year or so, we're going to see the league revise the way it bids Super Bowls or awards Super Bowl bids. And so that it's not doing one-offs, it's going to do it in packages. So, say San Francisco, you get 4 Super Bowls over the next 20 years. How does that relate to L.A.? They could turn around and sell Super Bowl PSLs. So they could tell a San Francisco 49er fan, look, you want this seat for the next 4 Super Bowls that are held here? Give us $5,000 or X thousand dollars up front, and you'll have the right to buy that seat at face value when that game comes. They use that money out of thin air to finance a stadium. The league could finance a Los Angeles stadium and control it, and then all 32 teams benefit.
Okay. So the league then will own a stadium, and then they'll bring in a team.
Right. It's an unprecedented thing. The league is looking into financing the stadium itself. So it would take control of the stadium. It would sell the naming rights. It would sell the PSLs. It would sell the corners of the stadium, sponsorship corners. Then hand over the year-to-year operations of the stadium to 1 or 2 teams that they would put in L.A. Now, those teams would get the normal revenue streams of selling club seats, suites, general admission seats, local signage, et cetera. So all those, and they wouldn't have the cost of a stadium on their balance sheets. So, it would take a special owner because not everyone wants the big brother staring over their shoulder, but it would be an exotic in a market where they could host the Pro Bowl every year. They could put the Combine here. We already see that LA is one of 2 finalists to host the draft. They could have the draft here, and they could have it in a Super Bowl rotation, selling those Super Bowl PSLs and finance it that way.
What could go wrong, though?
Well, I mean, you've got a market that's already lost 3 teams. It's 3 if you count the Los Angeles Chargers for one season. So it's not a turnkey market. That's clear. And people in L.A. have grown very accustomed to getting their football on TV. It's just much more comfortable. You get the best games, et cetera. So, and you have people who are into their fantasy teams, and they don't want to go to a game. Maybe they want to sit home and watch Red Zone Channel. So, people in LA have grown very accustomed to that, and that's a risk. And there's no public money in California. But I'll tell you, it's a big deal that Jed York was able to get a stadium done in Santa Clara, because that sort of cracked the code on California a little bit. And people realize, but if you look at the stadiums in California, Charger Stadium, that was built in 1967. Oakland Coliseum has got to go. And so, and clearly Candlestick was maybe the worst stadium in the league. So you got 3 terrible stadium situations in California. And there's just no public money. The state's broke, and nobody wants to put any money towards a stadium.
But what about 2 teams sharing one stadium?
Oh, that's the league's vision for a couple of reasons. One, because L.A. could accommodate 2 teams. It's big enough to accommodate 2 teams. Another is, if you move one team into L.A., you want to maintain that leverage over other cities. You got to remember, L.A. has been probably more valuable to the league without a team than with a team. And so you could always say, hey, one team's in L.A., but we're thinking about putting another one in there, San Diego, Oakland. You better get on the stick or your team's moving to L.A. So, but I do think that the league envisions two teams in Los Angeles. It's had two teams before, and those teams didn't do bad in terms of drawing fans. They had bad ownership, but they were successful in filling the house. I mean, the Raiders in their last game drew 64,000 people. The Rams led the league in attendance 11 years. So, you can get fans to come to games here. But L.A.'s still a risk and very expensive.
He's Sam Farmer, the L.A. Times, covering the NFL. Yeah, that's what I'm wondering, that the evolution of TV, it's better. It's a better game to watch at home. We've made it so good that the stadium experience, they're trying to, dress these up now. Oh, we get exclusive video in the locker room before a game. Like they made the product too good for TV that I wonder what this will do when you put it in a big market like Los Angeles. Do people, are they really going to care about those teams if they're relocation projects there? And that instead of watching the Red Zone, that you'll actually go to a game itself?
Yeah, well, that is a big challenge for the league. I mean, Tex Schramm once said, we can't let this become a studio game, and it certainly has become a studio game, and people in L.A. are very accustomed and comfortable to watching on TV and not paying for parking, not waiting in line at the restroom, not having a beer spilled down their back, not having to wait for a beer, just going to the refrigerator. So, and I think you look at the double-edged sword of fantasy football, because it's good for the league in that it's heightened interest and everybody knows who the number 2 receiver in St. Louis is or whatever. But it's bad in that when you're at a game, you feel like you're out on an island and you're not watching your team play. Mm-hmm. And your team might be that team, it's your fantasy team. So I think that the popularity of fantasy football sort of cuts against putting a team in the LA market. But I don't think the league's afraid of that. I think they look at the opportunity and say, listen, this is sports meets entertainment, meets big business, meets a global culture, and LA has that to offer, and there are not a lot of cities that can match that.
But is it just a coincidence, though, Sam, that we're talking about the NFL in Los Angeles and perhaps the draft will be held in Los Angeles?
Well, I don't think it's a coincidence. I think in a perfect world, the league would want to crack the stadium code in L.A. before it puts the draft here, and therefore use the draft as a component to sort of get people riled up and put more and more events in L.A. and build up to the ultimate, which is having a team there. But I don't think that it is merely coincidental that the league's taking a hard look at Los Angeles. The league's looking at L.A., the league's looking at London. And those are two opportunities. Now, I would be surprised if London were to get a team with all the difficulties and hurdles that you'd face with London and challenges before L.A. gets a team. I think you've got to look domestically and say, we've got the nation's number 2 market and the number 1 sport, and we've got to find that way to marry those two again.
But you also have Los Angeles, because if you take an East Coast team like Jacksonville, then what conference are you going to put them in? What division? If you send St. Louis out there, they're already in the West. Oakland's in the West. Chargers are in the West. So you don't have to worry about that hurdle as well.
Right. And the fact that those teams are on year-to-year leases is crucial. And all are unhappy with their stadium situations and haven't been able to get anything done. And you look at the fact that Stan Kroenke in St. Louis has bought 60 acres of prime stadium land between Hollywood Park and the Forum, where he could put a stadium. Now, he might not get all the parking he'd want, but he could put a stadium in that spot. And the city of St. Louis, or the city, state, and county, and the Rams are $600 million apart in what they see, what they envision for a stadium. So, in order to close that gap, it's going to take a lot. And the fact that the Rams have played here, the fact that Stan has that land is key. And so whether or not this comes together, I mean, there's been so many false starts, it's ridiculous. But the iron has never been hotter.
Interesting. Interesting. I'll check back in with you, Sam, on Groundhog Day when it comes around again.
Well, if it's May, it must be L.A. That's what we always say.
Thank you,
in
Sam.
the off season.
Thank you, Sam.
Thanks, Dan.
All right, Sam Farmer, L.A. Times, covers the NFL.